Today I learned a thing, and that was how to better reuse cards in Heptabase to organise knowledge and for better recall, and especially the differences between moving cards and copying cards to whiteboards and pasting a synced card and what all of that means. So what I want to show you is this process in the way that I've organised some notes right through to how I start to reuse those on whiteboards. And really it's about embracing your inner squirrel. And for me, what that means is that I find that when I first bring a whole lot of notes into Heptabase, I think my brain logs that like a squirrel does when it stashes all its acorns somewhere. And I also want to be able to go back to that original stash, which is chaotic and a little bit unordered, so that I can, my brain probably knows where to find stuff there, but I also want to order it so I can find it in a few different ways, and I'm going to show you that process. So what you may start with is something like a PDF or a text file that's got a lot of information that comes in, and then you'll start pulling content out of that. So if that sounds like something you're not sure how to do, then the crash course that I put on YouTube might help you, and so you might be able to have a look at that. The link will be down below. But if I have a quick look at this card here, for example, this is what is come in. It's a whole series of tips about writing for screenwriting or playwriting, and this has come from a series of handwritten note journals, which I've then scanned and brought in here as text. I'll also create a YouTube clip on how I actually do that process. But for now, I just want to look at this next stage, which is how to organize these cards and actually how to reuse them in a number of different places. So what I've got here is a basic stash of text, and it goes on and on and on. And ultimately, I will have pulled individual cards out of here and drag those onto a whiteboard like this. And as I said, you can see that process more clearly in my crash course. But I'm going to move on from that to say what I end up with once I've done a little bit of formatting of the text. I end up with a big stash like this, which is all of the notes that I want or that I discovered from that particular source. So this here is the equivalent of about 20 something pages worth of notes from one journal of playwriting tips that I have been acquiring over time. This is one of many, and so what I want to do is to not only be able to find the things that I put in this book, because this book I probably track in my own brain about how I got those things there and where I was, and all those things actually might help me recall it. But I actually want to turn this into something a bit more useful. So at the moment, it went in out of order and it was a big pile. And so I'll probably do a bit of sorting and then create some sections, and I'll end up with something that looks a little bit more organized like this. So now I've actually got sections which show here some advice about plotting, some advice about satire, some advice about theatrical performance elements, language features of some of the writing tips, and even some starter quotes to get going. And this is kind of useful because it makes that book of notes a little bit easier to see all the patterns of things that were in there. As you may see, these actually have page numbers, so that book had 20 something pages, and you'll see that sometimes I must have been skipping from one idea to another. On page 15 I was exploring some stuff to do with satire. On page 16 that was continuing, but 17, 18 might have jumped across here and be about plotting and something else. So by reorganizing those back into here, I'm using sections, that becomes useful. But of course I do this process across a number of journals that I've been working on. So I have about 20 journals, which actually is somewhere around about 15 years of playwriting. And as I write some of those plays, I've just sometimes peppered in lots of little treasures in amongst it. So lots of little acorns and nuts to find, which even though I might have been working on one play, I've probably got sidetracked at some stage and put some notes down for other things. So what I want to show you is if I was going to then keep this whiteboard as one thing, which is actually some of the magic that Heptabase does. It allows me to have a stash like this, which is altogether, or if in fact it works best for your brain that you just have one page that looks like this, and you scan it and go, yep, that's enough information for me, it's organized enough, I can move things around, go, if I put that one here, yep, now my brain can find it. Then the good thing is that with Heptabase I can put every one of these cards onto other whiteboards. So I might have a whiteboard which is actually just writing tips, and I don't want to have some stuff that comes from here. For example, I've got some elements here which are about what actually happens on stage, some advice to directors, and some advice from like the Blue Man Group and things which are a little bit irrelevant to writing tips. So I want to create a whiteboard with just writing tips on it. So to do that, I have options where I can click on a card. When I do that, you may see there's a couple of little extra bits of information coming out because I've already done this process where it's telling me that it's been used in more than one whiteboard, and so the little tag comes at the top. We'll look at that, we'll zoom into that once we've actually started moving some stuff around. But if I click on this, you'll see that I get an option to move it to another whiteboard. Now, I actually, as I said, I think like a squirrel, I want it to stay on this whiteboard, so I'm not going to do a move. I've got an option to copy, but I'm going to just jump back one step to say that if you want to actually do a thing where you just want to do add to whiteboard, you've actually got an option that if you go to your card library, and remember up the top you can choose just the whiteboard you're working on. So I've clicked on this particular book. Now these cards are here, so I can actually just click on the one that I had, and if I right click on that, so I think I had this one here about the different plots. Now you'll see that what it actually says is add to whiteboard. It's not move to whiteboard. So from within the card library, if I went add to this card to whiteboard, I could choose a whiteboard that I want. And so I've got one that I've created called demo writing tips. So if I go move, it tells me it did that. If I have a quick look inside there, I've now got this card has arrived here, and it tells me it appears in more than one whiteboard. And so whatever changes I make on this card, whether it's in this whiteboard or in the other one, it's going to reflect in both whiteboards. So it remains a card that is actually staying linked inside here, and it's really useful because I don't have to keep updating it in lots of places. However, that would seem like a really slow process if I had to do that for every card. So that was an actual effectively what was add it to this whiteboard or copy to the whiteboard. If I had just from here gone move to whiteboard, it would have actually disappeared off this whiteboard that I'm looking at, which I don't want that to happen. So I've got another option, so I'm going to go to its neighbor, and what I'm going to do is show you there's actually this option of copy. So if I go copy, I can now just go to the whiteboard I want it to go to, and I can go paste. Now when it comes in, you'll see at the very top of it, it has this option which is either sync the pasted card or dismiss that message. So if I sync the card, it's doing like I just did, which is it's actually retaining all the links so that whatever I change here or in the other whiteboard they'll copy and they'll reflect those changes. If I go dismiss, it's actually making a copy of it, and then whatever I do in here won't mess up my original, which that might be something that you want, or you just might want to know that you've got the same card appearing, and again it'll have this little message above it telling you that it appears in several whiteboards because it's actually linked. If I went back to that other one, to the one I just had, and I chose a different card and I went copy, and then I come back to this whiteboard, and if I went paste and I go dismiss, you'll notice that above it, when I click on it, it's selected, it's currently blue, it's not showing me that message. And if I change something in here, it won't change, it won't be reflected in the original card. So it depends on whether that is something that you actually want to happen, where this card becomes separated, or whether like these two cards, they now are still connected to the original whiteboards. And so that's that idea of the paste as synced, which is really quite useful. Again, what I can do is if I want to do this a bit more efficiently, I can I can actually grab multiple cards like this, where I'm selecting them. You'll see they're getting a blue square around them to say I've selected them. If I go copy and I go to that, I'm just zooming out a little bit. If I go to this whiteboard, I can just go paste. They will arrive in here like that. Now, personally, I've found that if it does appear to allow you to copy sections, but they don't seem to behave, so I would just rebuild if I wanted in here a section that reflects what I had in the last one, so that they can stay as a group that moves around. But definitely the cards seem to be happy to come through with their links, but I think the idea of that doesn't bring the sections the same way is because you may want to use them in a different way. In the same way that at the moment I've got another blank whiteboard here, which if I go back to my ordered pile, I had a section here that had a few notes on satire, and I want those to come through. So I'm going to go copy to this whiteboard, and I'm going to paste those. And if I sync them, then whatever changes, I'll keep seeing those happen. And so I could be doing this across multiple whiteboards, which effectively for me would be multiple journals or notebooks that I've made over the years. And so this one, as I said, I've got a naming scheme. This is book 10. I know that this is page 15 of that book, so I can actually really quickly find that. But it also tells me that I could have a whiteboard that's actually got pages from book 1 and book 7, but they're all about the same theme. And so then it becomes the whiteboards themselves become the thing that's really useful for starting to organize your cards and starting to reuse those across different whiteboards. And that is really the special powers, the secret powers that Heptabase has, is this the ability for these cards to be reused and reused and reused without having to start again. If I had a folder structure and I had cards in it, I'd be making multiple copies of those if it was just a standard file system like Explorer or the Finder on a Mac. But here it's reusing the card, so it stays nice and light. The files stay smaller, but I can reorganize my information in lots and lots of different ways, and it's just it's fantastic because I can have entire whiteboards about components of that. If what I found in this in when I first sorted out my notes about writing, I might have found a whole lot of stuff that actually kind of connects to screenwriting, so I just make a screenwriting whiteboard, but it would still exist in this one. I could just come back and go, what's the advice? So it was originally, when I first thought about it, it was about plot, and now it's about something else. And you could extend this to any kind of fields of knowledge where you're actually just going, right, if I'm thinking like a teacher, which is one of the other things I do, I could have knowledge that I've collected for 1 year level and I'm reusing it for another. I could have something from one subject that I'm using for another, or from one class. And it's a really fantastic thing that it can do. So my advice is embrace your inner squirrel and enjoy the paste as synced feature. On the Discord server that Heptabase have, a user, Ethan W, about a year ago put up a cool little trick where he was actually showing using cards on a whiteboard and then actually also copying them to the same whiteboard to be able to have a graphical organizer of that. And I'll show you what I mean, because it's a little bit random or a little bit hard to understand. So he was doing something like this, where he was actually folding the cards, so that's making them smaller by using that little button there, if you hadn't found that before, but then having a copy of that and actually down here expanding them and moving the data around in a different way, even within one whiteboard. So if you want to go check that out, you'll see that's quite useful. But what I'll do is I'll post another clip about how I get my my journals into here, for those that think that that's a mystery. But other than that, I hope this has been useful.